if you ask the district, if you provide the district with a written request to assess, the district has to respond to that, and they either need to send you a letter telling you that they're not going to assess and why, or they need to send you an assessment plan. And if they send you an assessment plan, it has to be, developed within 15 days of your request, okay? So there's a few things about assessment plans that bear upon due process in the IEP meeting. One is the typical way you get the assessment plan is they send it home in your kid's backpack. So you find this thing, it's like a piece of paper, it's got a, date on it, and you're like, gee, this is a really professional way to send information back and forth. And you look at it, and it says they want to assess your son or daughter, and it outlines in the most general way, only general, the testing areas. So it'll say academic, cognitive, behavioral, motor, planning, etc. It won't tell you any of the assessments that are done. And the law doesn't require them to commit in advance, but the law also says that the assessment plan is supposed to be developed at the IEP meeting with parental input. So clearly this assessment plan that appears in the backpack doesn't. And so what you're looking for with the assessment plan is, first of all, did they generate it within 15 days? And second of all, was more input from you needed, because you might tell them that you thought that they needed to do a particular type of assessment and why, and then they need to respond to you. So does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And I'm taking notes because I've got this coming up.
Okay, well then when you get your assessment plan, Shannon, you have 15 days to return it.
Okay.
You have to, 15 days to consent. And the school districts are getting more careful about this because LAUSD got dinged last year on an assessment issue. And so, if parents aren't signing assessment plans timely, you might anticipate a letter that said, we sent this on this date, this is what we offered to do, we haven't heard from you, but, they're trying to make it clear to the state when the state comes in and audits that they're doing their part to ensure IDEA compliance.
It's a little bit rough, though. It's exactly what you described, though, that they send it home in your kid's backpack. And if you don't go through your kid's backpack every day, which I used to, I don't at 14 anymore, I could easily miss something. Is there anything that we can do about the fact that, that's not an effective mode of communication, sending home a letter with a kid who's on the autism spectrum? And
well, you could send them something. You could send them something in writing that says, my son has a disability. He doesn't always have good control over his organization and materials. I want you to send any and all correspondence to me via email with, attachments as pertinent, and that should solve the problem because they have, it's easy for them to send it in an email with your parent rights attached or procedural safeguards in the assessment plan.
Okay. I've noted that. All right, thank you.
Okay. So once they look at what they confront and they decide that they're going to make the child eligible for special education, they have to do this assessment and hold an IEP meeting and offer FAPE within 60 days of the parental consent assessment. So sometimes we get weird situations where the parent signs the assessment plan, but they don't date it. That would be a bad thing, because if later you're coming back and one of the things that you uncover as your, one of your search items when you're a due process detective is that they waited 90 or 120 days to do the IEP meeting, that's a violation. So you need a date on the assessment plan to show when it is that you made your initial request for assessment. Okay. So does that make sense?
That makes total sense, and I didn't know that at all. So that's great info.
Next issue, thank you. Next issue is assessment. Now, normally districts don't want to assess and they want to push it off to triennial evaluation, and then they want to try to convince the parent at the try that the parent doesn't even need to do an evaluation. That's been a recent trend. They changed the law so the 3-year isn't mandatory. But there are some situations in which actually the opposite thing happens, which is the district wants a reevaluation because they're generally searching for some, evidence that will bolster the result that they want to arrive at. Now, I know that's very cynical, but, you ask for a 1-to-1 aid, you're going to get an assessment. You ask for ABA, or an increase in ABA or whatever it is, you're going to get an assessment. So the question is, how frequently can they compel you to submit to an assessment? And the rule is not more than once a year and not less often than every 3 years. So if the district wants to assess and it's within the year, we'll look at it and say sometimes like, well, they don't have any right to do this, but if we don't do this, it's going to look bad to the hearing officer. It's going to look as if we were blocking their collecting of information in response to problems that we've been reporting. So we may recommend that you do the assessment anyway, but just know that they can't do it more than once a year.
See, my experience of it is the exact opposite. That the school always wants to assess, and and I don't want them to. And it's not that I don't want assessments. It's that I have our assessments done at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, and I don't want them done by the school because they want to take them out of class, and it takes so much time, and it's not his favorite thing. And if he's already gone through the CARD assessment, he doesn't want to sit there endlessly and do assessments. So
the district's allowed to do its own assessments.
Yes.
Whether you have a CARD assessment done personally by Dr. Graham-Pichet or not, but also if they've assessed in less than a year's time, if it's been less than a year, the law says that they can, that they can't assess more frequently than once a year, and that's Education Code 56043K. So you can check it out if you want. That's the provision that deals with reassessment.